WeAre podcast, where we're closing the racial gap by empowering, educating, and connecting Black, Latino, API, and Indigenous professionals to work, invent, build businesses, and invest in tech or sustainability. So today's episode, we're going to feature advanced sales techniques that will help you close more deals and exceed quotas. This episode features, I'm happy to announce, Lisa Mabry. She's a LinkedIn sales management alum and a sales leader who's worked for major media and tech companies like LinkedIn and Clear Channel, holding titles like sales manager and operations, exceeding annual quotas of over 150 million, equating to over $1 billion total in her career. So her overall portfolios included numerous accounts, holding ones for Salesforce and also Adobe. Lisa, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great, Karina. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. So first, I'd like to kick it off and just learn a little bit about you and your background. Who are you and where are you from?
Sure. So I am a sales professional. I've been in sales for over really 15 to 20 years. I've worked for major corporations like you talked about, including Clear Channel Outdoor and LinkedIn. I'm a Bay Area native. I'm originally from Oakland, California.
Okay.
And I've been in sales. I started my career in sales. I started out as a salesperson where I started as a sales assistant for a media company. And straight out of college, when I was in college, actually, I was in college with a communications major. I was wanting to be Shonda Rhimes before I knew who Shonda Rhimes was. I wanted to be in television production. And then I landed in New York and ended up getting a job as a sales assistant. And there was a salesperson there, the top salesperson, who took me under her wing.
Nice.
And she just taught me the whole business. And from that point on, I just got a sales bug. And I moved into being a salesperson, built my own book of business from scratch. And I really learned when I did that how to do the fundamentals of sales that I'll probably touch on throughout this conversation. So I learned how to prospect. I learned how to build rapport with clients. And I learned how to really have tenacity and grit. And I was doing all this before there were digital tools available to us like we have now, like Sales Navigator and other digital tools. Yeah. I was really doing it the old-fashioned way, like picking up a phone and calling and prospecting. So I hope that the information I share with people is helpful, and you can lean on the sales leadership experience I've had.
That's awesome. What can attendees expect to get out of this by the end of this presentation?
Yeah, so what I hope that attendees will get out of this is, number one, to know that there is no such thing as a sales personality, that what makes you a good salesperson are certain attributes, a certain amount of discipline, and certain practices that you do to be a successful salesperson. And I have managed salespeople with various different personalities across the board, from introvert to extrovert and everything in between. And I have seen all personalities be successful. Secondly, if you are looking to move into management from being a salesperson, what I hope you walk away with are just some fundamental things to think about, and a few tools in your toolbox that you can use as you're looking to make that transition. And then also, I hope that you walk away with a general sense of knowing that the world of sales is constantly changing. Yeah. And that in order for you to stay competitive, what it means to really own your brand identity and own your own career, you are in essence entrepreneurs. And so how do you do that effectively and stay competitive?
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's going to be great. So something that we use in the promotion of this is we're talking about that you're specifically going to rely on some of your experiences leading the sales teams of being successful at LinkedIn. Can you share a little bit with our audience about the LinkedIn sales culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing to think about when you think about LinkedIn, it is a social network that is dedicated to having its members to promote their professional brand. And LinkedIn as a corporation really embraced that in their internal culture. And so the sales culture at LinkedIn is very much about making sure that you know how to promote yourself, understanding who your brand identity. They're very indoctrinated in the sales culture and salespeople and sales managers embracing that. And what distinguished this culture from any other culture I had ever worked in, and joining LinkedIn as a sales leader, is making sure that I was able to assist all of my salespeople and knowing how to engage within that kind of a culture when you're coming from multiple different personalities, as I talked about earlier. So it's really important that within that culture that you understand how to identify who you are, what your brand is, and how do you promote that brand effectively within a culture that really encourages you to promote your brand. And then the second part too is that the LinkedIn culture was also very, very big on coaching. And that is not always something that different organizations encourage in their sales leadership. And what was interesting about LinkedIn is that they really expressed and impressed that upon their managers to make sure that we were effective coaches for our salespeople.
Did they give you like did you attend particular trainings, or was that on you to network within the company to find those skills?
Yeah, they actually did do that. So LinkedIn would have coaching circles. And when we would come together and do sales training, so a couple times a year, we would come together and do sales trainings. They have one massive one that they do every year in Las Vegas. And then they have smaller ones throughout the year, depending upon your team. And we would do coaching practices. So we would practice with each other, just sort of doing role plays and scenarios where we had to coach each other through different conversations that I might have with one of my direct reports. So it might be around a direct report that's having difficulty closing a deal, or it might be around, and this did happen quite often, around direct reports that were not comfortable engaging the C-suite executives. And so we would have coaching sessions around that. They also did coaching circles where they would you would have multiple different sales leaders that would come together, and then there would be a sales coach expert that would be amongst the team in these coaching circles, and that sales expert would, or that coaching expert would coach us through effective strategies to use and coaching techniques to use as we're engaging with our direct reports. They also had one other thing I'll add. LinkedIn also did something called a career action plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me as a sales manager to work on this plan with my direct reports. And the purpose of the plan was to help them to elevate their skills and to help them to elevate their career path. And so it would be broken out into three different sections. The first section was reflect. The second section was strategize. And the third section was action.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would dedicate sometimes a quarter to that. So it might be 1 month on reflect, 1 month on strategy, 1 month on action, and we would work out a plan to have them, to take them literally from point A to point Z in terms of where they wanted to go with their careers. And that's something that's really new and exclusive to the LinkedIn culture.
So if you're going to, if let's say someone is listening right now, they're at, and they want to replicate that for their organization, they're a sales leader. How would you instruct them on doing it? I know that you got really detailed in your explanation, but is there anything that you could just summarize, like maybe in 5 steps, like these key things that they need to do in order to get that set up for their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And are you talking, Karina, if they are a salesperson or a sales leader, or if,
Yeah, I
yeah,
was thinking from a sales leadership perspective. Like I'm listening and I'm like, we need to be doing this at our organization.
right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so one thing is to adopt a culture of coaching, right? And that can happen anywhere. Not if your company does not necessarily provide resources or support for you on that, I would say individually as a manage, start to institute that in your operations, in your own business operations. And then, I mean, you could always take that to a human resources person or to sales leadership within your organization and say, hey, I think it would be really helpful if the company provided coaching resources to us. There's a lot of benefits to salespeople, sales leaders knowing how to effectively coach their direct reports.
I was just wondering, are there specific resources like a recommendation that you have of a book or anything, or what do those look like?
There's actually, I think it's called, I'm going to try to remember this, but I think it's called The Coaching Way is
Mm,
a book. And there are a number of coaching courses and certificates and things that you can get out there. But I do believe that, and I'll make sure I get it to you, Karina, afterwards, so you can
Yeah.
supply it to the people that are watching this video. Um, that it's, I think it's a book. It's a book, and it's called The Coaching Way, and it's really it's a useful guide to how to adopt coaching principles. Quite frankly, in your professional life as a sales leader, but also just in your personal life as well. The principles work equally as well with family and friends.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So then, can you talk about some real world examples where these strategies made a significant impact on then the sales outcomes?
Yeah. So I had at LinkedIn, I was working for a LinkedIn marketing solution. So that's their advertising arm.
Mhm.
And I was managing a team of 9 account executives within the healthcare vertical. So at LinkedIn, within LinkedIn marketing solutions, the teams are separated by industry, right? By sector. And
Yeah.
so I worked for both the education sector and the healthcare sector at LinkedIn. And when I joined the healthcare team, they were they're plateauing. So their annual quotas, they were hovering just below hitting their annual quotas. They hadn't yet hit their quotas for the last 3 quarters. So I walked into an operation that was really in need of like a booster shot
Mm-hmm.
in terms of boosting our ability to generate revenue. So one of the first things I noticed was that my team, the majority of my sales team, did not follow any form of a formal sales methodology.
Oh.
So, yes. And so people who are watching this who are sales professionals, you may or may not be using a actual formal sales methodology. There are many that are out there. I was reared under a consultative sales methodology. And that's a methodology that literally it's a process, and it starts from prospecting all the way through to the close of the deal. And so what I did is I instituted within the team what is a sales methodology that I've used, which is called the MEDPIC methodology. And
Med,
so,
MED.
yeah, it's actually MEDDPICC.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it stands for metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, paper process, implication of pain, um, champion, and competition. And so you go through that entire process from start to finish. And this is for salespeople who they're a full cycle salesperson. So they're a salesperson, like I said, that goes from prospecting all the way through to the close of the deal. Um, and so I started to coach. I coached my team on the MedPick methodology. And so we talked about using metrics and the power of researching your prospect deeply before you even make contact with them.
Mm.
We talked about and what data and analytics and insights can you use that'll be helpful to you when you actually get to the point where you're going to have a conversation with your prospect. We talked about understanding that they needed to understand the economic impact to that prospect, right? And that's where the economic buyer comes in. There's always something that the person sitting across the table from you that you're selling to, there's always some sort of quantitative result that they need to achieve. And you need to understand what that economic impact is. We need to understand what the decision criteria is as well. And so I coached my team on that. I coached them on, do they understand the decision process of the prospect that they're talking to? And then what is the process within that organization to actually get that deal approved? Who are your champions? What are their pain points? And then, finally, what is the competition and what does the competition look like? And I coached my team every step of the way, both collectively as a group. We would meet once a week, and I would conduct a 15-minute coaching session with the team on that as part of our weekly meeting. And then I would also coach each person on my team individually because they all had individual strengths and opportunities for growth. And I would identify what that is. And then I would coach them on the part of the process that they needed to work on.
Oh, that's great.
And as a result of that, we started to see our revenue grow.
That's
So
awesome.
we saw, and within 3 quarters, we were already surpassing our quotas by 16 and 18%.
Congratulations. That's great. Um, What about things that are unconventional techniques? Have you seen work exceptionally well in closing than large deals? Anything that you could share with our audience that they may not be aware of?
Yeah. So there's an unconventional technique that I actually used that
I'm getting excited. It feels suspenseful.
it's not really one that anyone taught me. And I'm gonna be honest with you. Nobody really taught me that. Somewhere along the way, I just decided to try this and test it, and it was successful and it worked. So, in full disclosure, it was also, I was piggybacking off of some of these sales techniques that I had used in terms of your champion. So for people that don't know what a champion is in the sales process, a champion is someone that may not necessarily be the decision maker in making the decision to buy your product, but they influence the decision maker, and they have a lot of influence on that final decision. And so as a salesperson is moving through the process of closing deals, there it is really important that they identify who the champions are, and that they connect with those champions and they develop a relationship with them. And while you're developing the relationship with the champion, try to understand what value could you bring to that champion if your product is the product that they eventually end up buying. What I mean by that is there a benefit to the champion, and can you identify a benefit to the champion if your product was instituted in that company? Is it going to make their job easier? Is it going to make them shine in some way? Look for something that would make them like basically make them shine in the eyes of the powers that be within their organization. And oftentimes the champion doesn't often get face time with the decision maker. Sometimes a champion is like a marketing manager, or they have influence, they have decisions, but the actual person making the decision is a VP level executive, and they don't often get face time. So the unconventional thing that I started doing is I would invite the champion to be on my call to help me pitch the product.
Yes.
And what that did was it gave the champion an opportunity to shine in front of this in front of this decision maker, that had a lot of influence within the company.
There's
And it
accountability.
also gave my product credibility. So the fact that I wasn't just a salesperson sitting across from this VP pitching on my own, I allowed this champion that came internally from their organization and their company
Right.
to really weigh in and visibly show their support for my product.
So I'm a tech marketer, so I apologize if everyone listening already knows this, but um, the champion, can be the person that actually submitted the actual inquiry, requesting that demo and is moving it along. But what are some questions that a rep could ask to determine other champions in the organization? Because especially for enterprise deals, we know that there could be, 11 different influencers for that deal.
Exactly. So first, you again, going back to my med pick methodology, you have to understand what the decision process is and what the decision criteria are. Like those two areas are fundamentally critically important, because as you're doing your due diligence, as you're asking questions to your initial contact, you're going to learn all the different people and departments within that organization that are going to be impacted by your product. And as you learn all of those different pieces in the decision process, and you learn all of those different pieces, departments that are going to be impacted by your product, then you want to start to ask, how can you get, like, who would be the best person within those departments to talk to, and get introductions from people into those different departments, and keep doing that along the way. So you start with your initial contact person, you ask the right questions, you find out who's going to be impacted by your product, and then you want to make sure that you get FaceTime with each one of the key people within those departments, or or on other teams, or even other people on the same team, that are going to be impacted by your product, and then develop a relationship with them that way.
How do you deal with it then when it's, it's hard to get that meeting at what, and it's delaying then your the time to close. At what
Yeah,
point do you say like, okay, maybe we just need to accept we're not going to be able to get that, you know, person influencer involved in it, and we're going to move on to, we only need, you know, these other 6 people. How do you make those
right.
determinations or guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't need it. I mean, at a certain point, and honestly, like sometimes you're like, you don't need all of those people. It could be, I mean, you don't want to be
Mindset.
trying to get meetings for 30 people. There
Mm-hmm.
might be 30 people that are going to be impacted by your product, but you don't necessarily need to get in front of 30 people. What you want to decide are who are the key people that you need.
Okay.
And so you can decide who's key and who's not key. And again, at some point, you really do need to be having most of your conversations with the decision maker or decision makers, right? And then just ask the decision maker again in that decision process, what exactly needs to happen and what do you need to know in order for you and your team to be able to make this decision. And
Great.
then once you know that, you can decide who's really key and who's not key. Sometimes it's helpful. There are nice to haves and then there are need to haves, right? And you can determine that as a for people as well. And so if the decision maker says, well, we really need influence from marketing or we really need influence from product,
Mm-hmm.
then just make sure that you fundamentally focus on marketing and product. Something that's also helpful is to have, again, someone else, like try to go as high up as you possibly can. Because when a VP tells somebody to get on a call with somebody, they're going to get on the call.
That's true. And
You know what I'm saying? So start at the top. I believe in starting at the top. Like start at the top. And then once you're at the top and you start to get the buy-in from the top, then they will start to play their hand and make sure that the right people get in front of you so that they can get what they need to make their decision.
that's great. Thank you. What about, you know, breaking through that C suite as you talk about starting at the top? You know, those decision makers in the enterprise deals, any tips for success there or things that you've seen work really well?
I have encountered a number of salespeople that just don't feel that they have the confidence to approach a vice president or even a CMO
Mm,
or a CFO or whomever is the appropriate C-suite executive for them to connect with. I want to tell every salesperson out there, you do have everything that you need already inside of you to make contact with that person. The only difference is that, well,
they
A,
get
you need
paid
to do
more.
your homework. Yeah, what'd you say?
I said they get paid more.
Yes, they get paid more. Um, they also don't have a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing that when you do get in front of a C-suite executive, you need to be brief, you need to be broad. A lot of times they're not particularly interested in the nitty-gritty of everything. They want to know it from a high level, right? And so my recommendation, and as I've coached my salespeople,
Yeah.
my recommendation has always been do your research, look, a lot of times C-suite executives, particularly now, and they're doing more so on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
They're posting their own LinkedIn posts. They're more visible than they used to be. Social media has made that where C-suite executives are often more visible than they used to be, championing their product, right? And so make sure that you're abreast of the most recent things that they've talked about. But also start broad and then get more specific as they ask for more specifics. And what I mean by that is give them general strokes of what your product will do for them, how it will help in the marketplace. These are things that people in the C-suite executive they're interested in. They're not interested in the nitty gritties of how your product works unless they ask. They don't want to know the minute details of exactly how the product works. They want to know more of what is the economic impact that my product is going to have, that your product is going to have, or my company is going to have by using your product. They want to understand how it's going to position them in a competitive marketplace. They want to know that you understand their industry. They want to know that you understand their business. Um, and don't take up a lot of their time, and don't, like I said, do not give them too many details. They typically don't like a lot of details.
So, what advice do you have for reps who encounter resistance when trying to gain buy-in from senior executives?
Yeah, well, it's objections are always a challenge to deal with. The advice that I used as a salesperson that was taught to me, and
Mm-hmm.
then I taught it to my salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
I had a sales manager said to me, if you establish, like, if you establish price before you establish value, then price is going to be the driving factor to
Oh.
whether somebody buys your product or not, right?
Hmm.
And once you do that, then it's hard to go back and establish value. I'm sure every person that's watching this right now has been in a situation where they bought something and they paid more than they wanted to pay, but they bought it because the value that it was going to bring to them, whatever that value is.
I see.
And what's important about that is you can have a product that represents a different value to each one of the people that are going to buy that product, right? So Karina and I, you and I could both use like the same, say, hair gel, but you're using it because you want it to do one thing for your hair, and I'm using it because I want it to do something else for my hair, right? But it's the same product. And so, as a salesperson, it is important that we understand specifically what is the value that our product is going to bring to that specific decision maker,
Mm.
or that C-suite executive. And you have to determine what that is, right? And so you still get an opportunity when you're in front of a C-suite executive. Oh, and a point that I do want to make is don't pitch them. You do not want to pitch a C-suite executive unless they actually are the decision maker. A lot of times the VPs or at a C-suite level, they're influencers, believe it or not. They don't always necessarily make the final decisions.
True.
Every so often they do.
Mm-hmm.
But so you don't want to, don't use that time to pitch them. Use that time to understand the value that they see that they're going to see in your product, and establish what that is.
Okay.
Once you establish that value, for the most part, you should have them locked. If you're getting objections from them, it's because they don't see the value in your product.
Can you talk to me about metrics? What signals and metrics do you look for when you're identifying, if a team is operating at its best versus when adjustments need to be made?
Yeah. So there are certain metrics in sales that I do look at on a regular basis, and it will give me an indication of how we're operating as a team, right? So one of them is what's the average deal length, right? So the average deal length, and what that means is how long does it take for a salesperson to close a deal from start to finish?
Mm-hmm.
And for certain products, it's very, very common for an average deal cycle or deal length to be 9 months. Just
Yeah,
depends
or
on the
18
product.
months. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are times when an average deal cycle, really, you should be able to close a deal on a product maybe around 45 days to 60 days, right?
Mm.
If I'm looking at the team and I'm looking at our average deal length is now extending into like 120 days or something
Okay.
like that, that is alarming. That'll start to raise alarms for me. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at our win-loss rates, and basically our win-loss rates are how many deals are we in terms of the overall deals in a deal pool, right? How many are we winning and how many are we losing? What's the percentage? So if our win-loss
Yeah.
ratio is 40% winning, 60% losing, why? Like, what's happening? You generally want to have more of obviously a larger win ratio to a loss ratio. So I am looking at that. I am looking at things like how are we doing quarter over quarter, right? So I'm looking at how the revenue is pacing quarter over quarter. Are we pacing up? Are we pacing down? If I'm looking at, I generally look at about 4 quarters. How are we doing over the last 4 quarters? If I'm noticing that we're pacing down, why? I want to look at I want to then look at economic trends. Are there certain trends that are happening? What is within our control and what is outside of our control, right? A lot of times market trends, if even the talk of an inflation. As a sales manager, we had people, and particularly for advertising can go up and down at any given moment. And so I had situations where just the thought, we weren't even in economic recession yet. Just the thought of if that we could potentially be heading there, a lot of our advertisers would start to pull back some of their advertising, or
Oh,
they wouldn't be adding anymore, just because they were trying to stay ahead of the potential of the possibility of a recession.
oh
So you
wow.
need to understand, like, I'm looking at that, and a salesperson also, don't just rely on sales managers to do this. Salespeople, I remind salespeople, you are entrepreneurs. You are running your own business. The entrepreneurs build their own businesses from start to, from scratch
Mhm.
on their own. Entrepreneurs build businesses within corporations, and that's essentially what you are. And as an entrepreneur, if you were running this like your own business, you'd want to stay abreast of what's happening economically.
It's true.
And you want to make sure that you understand that, particularly if you're in a business where you are you're managing clients across multiple different industries. At LinkedIn, I was primarily focused on the healthcare industry. But when I was at Clear Channel Outdoor and most of the other organizations, my client roster, it would span across numerous different industries. And I needed to make sure that I understood all as much as I could about all of them.
That's awesome. Can you give me if you had, if you could build, a sales rep, or if you're thinking about the daily habits of your top performers, what were they, and what do you believe is essential for a rep to have long-term success?
Absolutely. First and foremost, have a growth mindset. Mindset is everything. It's everything in life. It is everything in business. It is everything in sales.
Yeah.
And so a salesperson needs to constantly be learning. I'm still learning. A resource that I will impart to those that are watching. I'm a big believer of, like, Harvard Business Review. Like, HBR puts
Yeah.
out amazing information for
Mm,
leaders as sales leaders, but they just put out an amazing amount of information for just how to stay abreast of what's happening economically. I would also encourage people um, to do The Economist as well. The
okay.
Economist talks a lot about what's happening globally and how that can impact different industries, especially if you're in tech sales. If you're in tech sales, that's really important. And I know a number of people that are going to be watching this. If you're watching this through WeAre, you are in tech and sustainability, and the Economist will be an invaluable resource to that. So have a growth mindset. Secondly, do follow a sales methodology. Every successful salesperson follows some form of a sales methodology. I talked about MEDDPICC. It's MEDDPICC. Um, that's one that's used quite often in the tech industry, so you may already be familiar with it. There's numerous others. There's the Miller Hyman sales technique. There's sometimes that's called just consultative sales techniques as well, and there's various different methodologies. Go out there and research them. There's a bunch of them. There's a ton, and I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but they're out there and they're good, and follow them. I highly recommend that. Know how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And something that I taught to my salespeople as well as design thinking.
Mm,
Learn how to learn. First of all, learn what design thinking is, which is essentially a um, a way of getting to the root of what somebody's actual need is.
oh,
And so
interesting.
you ask a series of questions to get to that root. So, for instance, if I were to ask somebody, so you know, why would my product be important to you? Like, why would you want to buy my product? Oh, I want to buy your product because it's going to help our customers be able to um, do this certain thing better than they can do it now. Our product can help them do that. Okay, great. Why? Why will it help your customers be able to do that better? Okay, great. Why? And, like, literally keep asking why.
Mm,
And I have, every time I've done this, I've gotten to the root need. And I have seen so many salespeople, and I've been on so many calls modeling or watching salespeople, and I've also modeled for salespeople that do not ask enough questions. Have a list of questions prepared. Know what you want to do and what the information that you want to receive before you actually sit down in front of your prospect. So good salespeople know how to ask the right questions to get to the root cause. They're tenacious. Good salespeople are tenacious. They stick to it. They don't give up easily. Good salespeople know how to negotiate. So learn how to negotiate. A win-win. And so the best salespeople that I have seen, and I truly mean this, and it's something that I taught to my team and how I managed my team, is I was big about evangelizing our wins, right? So when a salesperson won a deal, I would let everybody know about it.
Yeah.
I would let the team know about it. I would let other heads in our organization know about it. And the way that I framed it and I highlighted it was I talked and highlighted the process that salesperson used to land the deal, right?
Ah,
I didn't hyper focus on the size of the deal. And I've seen a lot of organizations do that. When you focus on the size of a deal and you focus on closing a deal, you're what happens a lot of times is you miss an opportunity to really pay attention to the process. That process that you're using to close that deal is what you're using to establish rapport and credibility with that client.
yeah.
And so really when I coach, when I reward my salespeople, I'm rewarding them on the process that they use to get there. And I ask them questions like, tell me a little bit about the value, tell me exactly what our client is going to get out of using our product. Like, I need you to tell me in detail, what is the value that our product is going to bring to that customer? Like, tell me what that is. Can you tell me about a little bit about the business? I want you to literally tell me about how that business works. How does their business work, right? So I want to know these things. I'm not sitting in meetings with my salespeople asking them, so where are you on this deal? Why haven't you done
Mm,
this? Well, how are we getting to close? Like, or what's the size of the deal? Why can we get it bigger? Like,
I see.
so I think so. It's really, really important that a good salesperson be equally invested in the process as they are in closing that deal.
I've heard so many sales leaders, like I hear them drilling the team and they're like, that deal size, what about that, and
Yeah.
focusing on these things. So I think these are really valuable techniques that you're doing that not everybody knows about. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I
so
hate sales leaders like that.
I was thinking, honestly, while you're talking, I'm like, LinkedIn lost a good one. I don't know what they were thinking. They're going to watch this and
I
be
know,
like,
damn them. I know, right?
who was your competition at LinkedIn actually?
For on the advertising side,
Yeah. Would you say Glassdoor or who are their top competitors?
well, that's on the talent side. Yes. So LinkedIn has they have different divisions. On the talent side, which is what you're talking about, like people that are looking to staff, then yes, Indeed,
Okay.
ZipRecruiter,
Okay.
like all of those are competitors of LinkedIn.
Okay.
On my side, it was Meta and Google mostly were
Oh,
our big competitors.
wow.
So, because I'm on the advertising side. So the people that the people that want to advertise on LinkedIn also wanted to advertise, and they're advertising the LinkedIn members, right? To get them to buy a product or service. So they could do that on Google really effectively. They
Yeah.
could do it on Meta really effectively. And LinkedIn was more expensive.
So what would be the percentage? I don't know if you're allowed to share this, but when you're up against Google or Meta in a deal, how often would you guys win?
Uh, it was tough. I mean, like we probably won maybe 60% of our deals, 70. And then here's why. Because the distinguishing factor between LinkedIn, the biggest distinguishing factor between LinkedIn and our competitors in Meta and Google was
Mhm.
that Meta and Google, for their advertising end, they don't have reps. So
Oh,
most of the advertisers don't have reps. They have people that can assist, but they don't actually have reps. They don't have representative. They don't have a one-on-one relationship with a
okay.
salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you get to a really, really high level, you do. But at LinkedIn, that level was you only needed to be spending $100,000 or more a year before you were passed over to our team, who then would take and actually do like a managed service relationship with them.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. So now if we're pivoting and we're thinking, you know, account executives or even SDRs or BDRs, and they want to, move up into a leadership role. What are some skills that they should focus on? If we could start from the SDR or BDR level first, talk
yeah,
about the key skills, and then we'll move into those AEs.
absolutely. So generally, SDRs and BDRs depends on the organization.
Mm-hmm.
But usually SDRs, maybe a little bit different from BDRs, but SDRs are kind of like the first point of contact for a client, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
for a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and that's just what I was kind of sharing with you, in that LinkedIn had a team that was similar to an SDR team. As people came onto the platform to advertise on LinkedIn, they could do that from the platform. They didn't need a rep necessarily, but advertisers that did come in that way, they had access to a team of SDRs who would service them. SDRs typically are, if again, and not all organizations are set up this way. I've worked for organizations where there were no SDRs, there were no BDRs, there were just account executives, and they were full cycle. They did prospecting all the way to close. The reason I mention this is because generally where there are SDRs, the next step for them is to become an account executive. So a lot of times an SDR starts out as a sales development rep. They're a lot of times doing the prospecting. They're a lot of times they're bringing the companies onto the platform or onto the product, right? And then once they bring them onto the product, it is then handed over to an account executive who then manages that relationship moving forward, right? If you are an SDR and you want to be an account executive, then my recommendation to you is to understand how to build a relationship. So my recommendation would be, and really hone those values. You're, as an STR, you understand how to prospect. You understand how to close business. You understand how to pitch a product, right? So you have all the fundamentals you need to move into an account executive role. You just want to hone the skill of how do you then upsell? How do you cross sell? And you do that by, again, using a sales methodology. If you're not using one, get to know one. Um, get to understand what it means to sustain rapport with a client to get them to renew, because all contracts end. All contracts end and all contracts need to be renewed. And generally, it's an account executive's responsibility to do that within an organization if it's set up that way. So you need to also learn how to manage a relationship and understand how to do that. And once you get to an account executive level and you want to move, or you're at an account executive level and you want to move into leadership, start to, first and foremost, and you can do this in the SDR level as well. Um, Understand the power of your brand identity. So most people who move to leadership start to act like a leader now, exemplify those qualities now, when whatever role that you're in. And what that means is do be helpful, support leadership, um, learn how to present yourself and present your capabilities to the powers that be. Like, be very, very clear about what that is. Start to get to know people within the organization outside of your team. Find a mentor within your organization who is a sales manager that you respect. Find that mentor and really work with them and ask them what are the qualities that you need to be a sales leader within your organization, or if you move on to another organization as well. But start to act like a leader now and get involved, volunteer for things, initiate things. Leaders initiate, right? Leaders start things. Leaders create things. If you see a problem, don't just go to your manager and say, here's a problem, and sort of hand it over to that manager and be like, can you solve it? If you want to be a leader, come with possible solutions. Research it on your own. Start to be solutions oriented in terms of the problems that you see. Start to look for areas that, how would you change it? Ask yourself that question. Anytime you get frustrated as a salesperson, ask yourself, what would I do to change
Mm.
this situation, right? Um, and then something I will leave as far as making that transition from being an individual contributor to being a leader. First of all, know that you're going from managing your own business to now managing an entire sales operation.
Mm.
So you're going to be managing lead flow. You're going to be working very closely with sales operations within an organization, product. A lot of times you're going to be working with marketing as a sales leader. So you want to start to um, think that you're running an entire operation. That means that you're going to be running a daily duties and daily responsibilities for an entire sales operation versus just your book of business,
Right.
right? Also know that, and I see salespeople, really good salespeople, do this all the time when they get promoted to leadership. They
Mm.
think that everyone should be doing what they did to be successful, right? So if you want to be successful, particularly underperformers, if you have to manage and coach an underperformer, usually what good top performer salespeople that have converted into managers, what they want to do is they want to make carbon copies of themselves. Don't do that. Get to know the individual strengths of all the people on your team, and start to put that cap on. Start to put the cap on of, I'm managing a team of individuals who have individual strengths, who
Yeah.
have individual areas that they need to work on as well, but they have individual skill sets. And also making that transition from being an individual contributor to a sales leader. And I mentioned this before, make sure that you are staying abreast of different leadership trends. And it doesn't necessarily have to be around sales leadership, but make sure that you understand what it means to be a leader of people, because you're going, and what it means to inspire and motivate people, because you are going to have to be that cheerleader. You're going to be the you're going to be you're going to lead by example. You're going to be the person that they look to when times are good. You're going to be the person they look to when times are not so great. So you need to know that you possess that. And I would also encourage that you actually like get coaching on how to be a manager. Sometimes organizations have that. LinkedIn had that. So
Mm.
if you were going into leadership, into management, they had a number of resources to help you make that transition. But other companies I worked for did not, had none.
Mm.
And so take it upon yourself. If you don't work for an organization that offers those type of capabilities, um, use them. There's a lot of courses. LinkedIn Learning is an amazing resource for that.
Oh. Oh.
LinkedIn Learning is so good for going on and learning. It's part of their premium plan, so there is a cost to have access to LinkedIn Learning, but it is a good and valuable resource to teach you about leadership.
Oh, great. Thank you. So it's a nice segue because if we're talking about, motivating others. So, WeAre is an organization for Black, Latino, API, and Indigenous professionals that are in tech or sustainability. And so sometimes we feel this where, we may feel unseen or undervalued in our roles. And so, what's one thing that you would, tell someone that they can do today to advocate for themselves and showcase their value?
Yeah, well, in order to showcase your value, you need to know your value.
Oh.
And I would make sure that you understand what you bring to the table. Sometimes people don't really understand the value that you bring to the table. I'll tell you, I recently met with the former CMO of Clear Channel Outdoor, who I worked closely with when I worked there. And he and I sat down and we were just catching up. And reminded me and really brought to my attention
Mhm.
something about my own value, that even in my years of experience, he really just did a wonderful job, quite frankly, of like summing up all of my skills, and he wrapped it up in a way that reminded me of how to position my career, right, in a kind of unconventional way.
Mm.
And so so know your value, and one way to do that is to list all of your accomplishments. So list all of your accomplishments that you have gained, and really dig deep and think about that. It could be you you helped, like you could talk about obviously your accomplishments as a salesperson in terms of you hitting your quotas and things like that. But you
Mhm.
can also talk about the types of relationships that you have developed with your clients and with your customers. You can talk about the relationships how well do you build relationships internally amongst your peers, right? Have you ever provided mentorship opportunities to people within the organization? Just really understand like who you are fundamentally as a person and
Mhm.
embrace that, right? So know your value. Then once you know your value, understand how decide where it is that you want to be, right? So if you know your value and you decide where it is that you want to go, like have a goal to hit. I believe in that. So if you say, I want to accomplish this in the next 2 years, define exactly what that is, and then look at all of your skills and your accomplishments and your value, and look at how that fits in to that place where you want to go, right? um, and that, because that's going to really determine how you need to continue to increase your brand. So you may have a number of the attributes that you need and the accomplishments that you need in order to do well in that role, but there's some things that maybe you don't have as well, or you need work on, or you want to upskill, right? So you need to know where you are to know where you want to be, right? And to know what are the areas that you need to work on, and give yourself a plan, and find the tools and resources to do that. And I would even encourage you to find a coach.
Mm.
Find your own coach. It doesn't necessarily have to be within your organization, or even by your manager. If your manager serves that purpose, great. But if not, find an outside coach and work with a coach to really help you to hone your brand identity and how to present that brand identity. There's also a number of really good resources on YouTube. There's a number of really good resources, like I said, on LinkedIn Learning that can be helpful to helping you to identify how to position yourself as a brand.
Thank
Was
you.
that the question, Karina? I'm trying to
Yeah,
think.
you did great.
Okay.
Okay. And so we're almost at time. And so I have one last question. To anyone who's afraid to take that leap, what would you say for these people that are afraid to take the leap into something new or uncomfortable? What would you tell them to help them push past that fear?
Yeah. I would say, or I am saying to those that are watching, imposter syndrome is real,
Mm.
right? It is real, and it impacts people across all levels. People at who are C-suite executives have imposter syndrome. The only difference is that if you are feeling fear, a lot of times it's because you're walking into the unknown. It's something you've never done, and generally, if it's something you've never done, you're not confident at it because you're not entirely sure you can do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No.
Um, and so, first, I want to say you don't need to be perfect. Perfection is the killer of progress. If you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting until you think you're ready, don't wait anymore. Like I said, if you decide that in order for you to be prepared for where you want to be or where you want to go, and there's a certain skill that you feel like you need to have, or potentially you do need to have, well, then learn that skill and then move forward with it. But don't feel like you need to be polished, perfected, perfect, and have had accomplished all these things and have degrees and accolades or whatever to do what you want to do. You don't need to. Um,
Don't.
You don't. You really don't need to. So my advice is to learn the fundamentals of what you need in order to do that job well, to where you want to go or what you want to attain. Don't spend a ton of time doing it. Give yourself a target date. Be like, I want to do this and I'm going to do it by this date, or I'm going to give myself 30 days or whatever it is. And then on that 30th day or whatever that target date is, just move. Just move. One of the things that I a takeaway from me is and I learned this a long time ago about it's a minimal viable product. So
I was
basically, a
just
lot of
thinking about that.
right, exactly. So like
Yeah.
they don't wait till the product is perfect.
Yeah.
Like they launch it and then they iterate it.
Yeah.
And so that is something that you can use in your own career.
Mm-hmm.
Like learn, like create a product, right? You are the product. Create a minimal viable product in yourself,
Yeah.
right? And then iterate.
Yep.
Make a move, and then you're going to do this, you're going to pivot, you're going to change, you're going to adapt, you're going to modify, and then you're going to and every time you do that, you gain more and more confident. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you.